All right. Hello again. If everybody could go ahead and take a seat, we'll get going for the inaugural Tempe Accelerates session. I'm really happy to see so many people here this afternoon in the first of what will be several of these sessions. We're going to have 2 presentations per session. We're going to allot about 10 minutes per presentation, leaving about 20 minutes for questions, comments, feedback. If you see things, if you notice things about the presentation, have questions about the performance measures and the strategies, this is a wonderful opportunity to give the presenters and the various areas that are presenting your comments. That's really what this is all about. This is a constructive process to help all the different areas of the city come together and help us all achieve our goals. So without further ado, I will turn it over to the first presentation, which is going to be regarding performance measure number, what's the number? 1.02, achieve cardiac arrest survival rates greater than the national average as indicated by the American Heart Association. So take it away, Andrea.
Thank you all for being here today. I'm Andrea Glass. I'm the Deputy Chief of Medical Services for Tempe Fire Medical Rescue. I have Monique Lind, who is our EMS coordinator. So we will be discussing the cardiac arrest survival rates and our council priority of being safe and secure. First thing we want to discuss is why this even matters in the first place. And for us, it's our entire mission. Our mission is essentially to provide for the preservation of life and health within our community. So for us, it's our entire mission for the city of Tempe to be able to live, work, and play. In order for that to occur, we first have to ensure that you're going to be able to live. And that's why this matters. As we went through, we looked at the data, saw that the average male that was occurring with cardiac arrest was around 51, 52 years old, and for females was around 56, 57 years old. I don't know about you, but I'm not that far off from that age. And so for us to be very good at this is incredibly important because there's a lot of life left to live. So that's why this matters for us. How we go about achieving this is we first establish our measure, then we evaluate our training programs, and then what we do is look for opportunities for improvement. And that usually comes in the shape of technology. So those are the ways that we go about achieving this. So our measure was based off the 2015 American Heart Association standard. It's a national standard, and its overall survival rate. That overall survival rate is at 10.6%. When we talk about cardiac arrest, what that truly means is that the person no longer has a heartbeat and no longer has any breathing capability. So no heartbeat, no breathing. For the survival rate to occur, that's essentially they get a heartbeat back, they get breathing back, and they're discharged from the hospital. So this is a very high level to try to achieve, to be able to take somebody who has no pulse, no respirations, no breathing, no heart rate, and get them to survive and walk out of a hospital, or at least be able to be removed from a hospital. So that's what we're basing this off of. So for us, our overall performance was at 13.64%. We actually improved from last year's, which was 11.86%. So we're starting to continue to see a trend on the upward movement to be able to improve our success rates, our overall success rates. One thing we are finding as well is that with our bystander CPR, that's increasing as well. So from the previous year, we had a 9.9% increase for bystander CPR. So we're starting to see the more bystander CPR that we're getting, the improved rates we're getting for success on our end. So some of the things that we've done with our training programs, we've identified quality of compressions really makes a difference in our success rates with CPR and with being able to successfully resuscitate our patients or bring them back. We have a compression mannequin, and I'll show you some slides that demonstrate what we see with our compression mannequin, but it actually identifies how well we're doing compressions. It identifies our rate, it identifies the depth of the compressions, and also a recoil. So we have to be able to lift our hands up off the chest, allow the blood to fill back in the heart to be able to pump everything around. So it identifies how well we're doing all of those measures. Something else we do is our CCR scenarios. That's our cerebrocardial resuscitation. Essentially, it's our form of CPR that's continuous. And so we identify how well we're doing that as a group and the style we're doing, which we'll get into a little bit later. So for us, the initial feedback, this is what it looks like when we do a 2-minute scenario. And we have our folks do 2 minutes of compressions, and then we identify how well they're doing them. So this person didn't do very well. This person was at 41% overall. When you see that yellow line on the bottom, that's not doing well. That's showing that we're not as effective or as efficient with our compressions. So we start off here, and then what we'll do is we'll do an educational series, and then we'll do it again for another 2 minutes, and we'll see what kind of improvement we have. So this was an initial line. This is another initial attempt with one of our personnel. And we make this as a competition. We are very competitive in nature, so this is something that we start to look and see what everybody's numbers are and see how good they can get, and we really strive for that 100%. So when you see this, you'll start to see some green lines, and then they'll fade off into the yellow. That yellow started at about 1 minute, 20 seconds, and that's something else we've identified, that we need to rotate our people every 2 minutes because you get tired and you start to fatigue, and you start to see it on our compression. So this was after reinforcing the training. You see a significant difference with the green line all the way across, and this ended up being a 98th percentile for the overall, and the green is good. The green is what we're striving for. So this is one of the techniques we utilize in identifying how good we're doing our compressions and training on doing appropriate compressions within our crews. Something else that we do is we train as a pit crew. I don't know if anybody of you are NASCAR fans or any kind of race fans, but the pit crew in that pit lane, they try to attempt about a 3 to 5 second turnover once they come into the pit lane and get them out onto the raceway, and that makes the difference in winning and losing in a race. For us, training as a pit crew, we identify specific spots for our personnel to be at, and when we're doing compressions and we rotate between that 2-minute interval, we try to keep it under 3 seconds. So 3 seconds or less is what we're training for as well. So we identify specific positions. Each person has a role. We tend to have one person calling out the shots, and they're basically our crew chief. And that way it makes it a seamless operation. And again, we try to keep between less than 3 seconds when we change people doing compressions. So other training programs, what we've been doing, we've actually got out with Tempe Police Department and been able to do compression-only CPR training with our police officers. We do have known successes with our police officers doing compressions, and it's pretty exciting when they have our crews arrive, they're doing successful compressions, and then we're able to bring those people back. So we do have known instances of that occurring. Another thing that we do is we're doing compression-only CPR training in the high schools. We actually have that going on this week and part of next week, where we hit every single high school in the Tempe Union High School District. And to date, we've taught over 17,000 students since 2012. So we started where we do once in the spring semester, once in the fall semester with their health classes. And then we have now branched out, and we also do summer school sessions. So we're trying to hit as many high school students as possible. Again, we've had significant success with this, and we've had high school students who actually have been the ones who stayed calm on scene with their parents and their grandparents. And actually, we had a student successfully do compressions on her grandmother, and her grandmother did survive. So we're seeing a lot of success, good success stories within our community. So this is obviously a picture of some of our students doing that. And again, we've had a lot of positive feedback in the schools. So technology. Technology is something we look at moving forward, and how can we better use tools to provide treatment. This is an IO. It's basically a drill that it has a needle on it, goes right into the shoulder, and it allows us to give medication right into the bloodstream. The reason we do it in the shoulder is closer to the heart, so we can get those medications into the body as quick as possible, and that's improved some of our success as well. We also have what's called an eye gel, and this basically is something that goes into the airway and helps us provide oxygen to the patient as we're providing treatments. It's a very quick way to make sure that the tongue stays out of the way and that we can get good oxygen moving into the body. King Vision. So what we do is we'll intubate, which we stick a tube down somebody's throat, help them breathe. And what we found is this King Vision actually has a camera scope on it. So we can actually go down and see what we're doing a lot better than what we've had in the past. It also helps us with not getting as much bodily fluids on us. So it's safer for us, but it provides better vision for us to be able to put that tube down somebody's throat and be able to help them breathe. So this is one of the other advancements that we've had. And then AEDs. Tempe is very supportive with the AEDs. We have at least 50 within our city. We obviously have one over here on the wall. So automatic external defibrillator, it's able to basically turn it on and it guides you what to do, and it helps you provide shocks to our patients, which is one of the major things that they need to be able to survive. So this is some of the other technology that we've been really pushing out into the community. So moving forward, some of the things that we've identified that we want to try to do, since we find that bystander CPR has been so successful in helping us with success rates, is to establish a goal of trying to provide compression-only CPR training to all of the city departments over the next 3 years. So that's something that we can go out, we can educate on compression-only CPR with all of our city employees over the next 3 years, but start with the areas that have the most public interaction. So our libraries, our parks and rec, and anywhere else that tends to have more population in it, and start with those folks and then branch out and hit the other city employees. Something else is to continue to look at research and technology. There are instances of equipment that can help do the compressions for you, and where we have the least success is moving patients from the floor to the gurney to the ambulance and then into the hospital. That's where we start to drop off on our compressions. So if we can put a machine on at that point and let it just do the compressions from that point on, it will help us again with making sure adequate compressions are occurring. Those are about $10,000 to $15,000 each. So obviously that's a challenge for us. So we're trying to look at ways that are both fiscally responsible and can provide that type of quality compressions that are uninterrupted. And then again, trying to identify if there's other parameters that will show success for us. So whether it's the amount of bystander CPR and that level being above the national average, or if we actually branch out and start looking at neurological function or brain function and how successful we are at having that part and using that as an identifier. We know we're improving with our success rates and staying above the national average, but this might be another avenue that we can review and look into to guide our success or determine our success in the future. So I'd like to open it up for questions.
Well done. Any questions?
You don't have to have any. So that was actually based off the 2015 standard. The rate that we had in the 11.86% was in 2015 as well. And then we bumped up to 13.64%. So that was our guideline. When we are looking at it now, actually in 2016, when I looked at the most current American Heart Association, it's now at 12%. Is the success rate, the overall success rate for American Heart Association. So the nation is rising as well, and we're trying to stay above that. So when this was actually established, it was established at that 10.6% in 2015. For 2016, it's now 12%. So we're trying to stay above that.
Ken?
So the survival rate is to discharge from the hospital. So that's what they have it established as right now, is discharge from the hospital. Now, where we were talking about potentially looking at other parameters would be the neurologic function, and that would be how well is their, or how good is their quality of life following that discharge. So there is a score that we utilize is from 1 to 5. 1, no deficits. 2, you have some minor deficits that you were still able to function on your own, but you have a few deficits. A 3 would be somebody who has significant deficits that they have a caretaker assisting them. A 4 would be they are actually bedridden, cannot care for themselves, and comatose. And then 5 is no brain function at all. So that's something that we want to look at in the future, is how good is their quality of life after discharge from the hospital and what type of facility.
And the percentage you're measuring, is that the responses of Tempe Fire Medical Rescue, or is that citizens of Tempe who get responded to the automatic aid system?
So it is, for us, Tempe specific. Actually, we have both sets of data. So we have Tempe specific, which is the 13.64%, and then we have a system-wide, but that includes all of the valley. And we get our data sets from Share, AZ Share, which is a statewide collection data point, and they get the hospital data as well, which is something we're not able to get with our software. So we have what they provide to us, which is Tempe specific. I can't answer specifically how much automatic aid.
When you say Tempe specific, you mean calls in Tempe?
Calls in Tempe that our units, so we provide the data from our electronic patient care report system. So any of the calls that we run in Tempe where we've done an electronic care report is submitted to that AZ Share site. And then they also get the information from the hospitals.
So your goal doesn't relate
It's not differentiated out that I can see on the site. Does that answer your question?
Don.
Just so I'm clear on Ken's, I think what Ken's asking, if it's a mutual aid response, does it count in this number or does it not count in this number?
System-wide number, yeah.
Well, whatever you call it.
It
When the truck comes from Chandler to Warner Ranch,
system-wide, there's a system-wide number, which actually is around the 10.6% that is collected. But the ones that are automatic aid, where they're coming in providing the help versus our company is providing the help, it's hard.
it's different.
It's
It is different.
It is a
Okay,
different
I think
number.
that was your question. My
Yep.
question is, you did a great job with all of the metrics around the compressions and all that, but I didn't hear you talk too much about the response time getting there. What's the nexus there, and what about that? What do you think about that?
We could actually, I believe we have that information. It's a different measurement. So it's a different measurement, but I will.
It's a different
I will
measurement,
speak to
but
that.
they're related, right? I mean, the faster you can get there and our staff can start doing compressions, the more likely that person is to survive. So there is a relation.
So here's what
Point.
I can speak to
I made
some
an
of that,
assumption
is
there.
that, obviously we strive for the 4 to 6 minute response time. And the reason we speak to the 4 to 6 minute response time is that you can be without oxygen going to the brain or circulating to the brain for 4 to 6 minutes before you start to have some detriment to brain function. So we strive for that, and obviously with our accreditation as well, we strive for that in the 90th percentile. But it is a different measure, and I don't have that data with me right here, but that's that 4 to 6 minute window, and what we strive for is specific to brain function and ability with the 4 to 6 minute without oxygen circulating around.
I want to make a comment because I don't want to seem like I was disrespectful at all toward your comment, Don. And when we did well, but this is an educational opportunity, and automatic versus mutual aid is extremely important to us. That in our world we differentiate, especially in a system where we're currently looking at IGAs for the 27 cities that participate, and we are in an automatic aid system, which does dramatically change the response time, which will impact outcomes. So we are automatic aid. So as Ken and you both alluded to, the city of Tempe is supported on all borders by automatic aid partners. So
I think this speaks volumes to your Fire Station 7, because I can see now that you're measuring this, people say, well, I live in Warner Ranch. What's my survival rate?
Right.
And the other part of it is that all our surrounding agencies are trained to the same standard with the continuous chest compressions and doing the CCR that's similar to us. That's the standard around the state, and that's something that we've really pushed for. So that training is all the same in the automatic aid consortium.
Right. But I think for the audience thinking about this, it just demonstrates that when we put forward performance measurements, we don't do so in a vacuum, that one performance measurement can affect another one, right? If we decrease our response times, it could correlate to an increase in survivability of cardiac arrest events, right? So these things do have, they relate to each other at some level. And this question of who's responding, I mean, we know Town of Guadalupe runs 1,300 calls annually in the city of Tempe. So what our performance measure, this one, isn't looking at directly is what is the survivability of when Guadalupe or Mesa or Chandler or Phoenix or Scottsdale responds here, or vice versa, when our units respond outside of our borders, and the survivability rates of those calls when we, and we do a lot, outside of the city of Tempe as a result of our automatic aid agreements, which is a good system because it's supposed to be the closest unit responds. So, but it's all related, right? Thought I saw someone else. Was there another question? No? I have a couple more, as long as we're still asking. As you look at this question of you're above the national average, to what extent above the national average is a reasonable target? You know, when we think about statistical deviations and things like that, you're about a percentage or two above the national average. What is the point? I mean, we're talking about that you want to exceed that average, and you are, and that's a good thing, and you want to go maybe to some advanced metrics over time, looking at quality of life, you know, statistics after the fact, but how much above is an adequate number to really say we're making progress, we're doing the right things, educating the community before we get there to make sure they're CPR trained and certified, et cetera?
That's a tough question because we want to see the continuous improvement, and I don't know if there truly is a metric that says once we hit 18% or we're above by 5 or 8%, that's adequate and we move on to the next. So for me personally, I'd like to see just continuous improvement. And I would say within, you know, to stay at least a couple percentile above that national average is where we would strive for, and then continue to see that progression. And I know there's a point where it may level off based on science and the body and what we have available to us, but you know, I would say looking at the continual progression through the years, and also the improvement or the percentages of bystander CPR, and start to look at what truly is that correlation, and then what other advancements or what other software. There's software out there called PulsePoint on cell phones that assist with, you know, being near somebody who's having an event, and if you do know how to do compressions, being able to go assist them. There's some concerns with that, but there is other software out there. And I think actually seeing what that correlation is between the bystander CPR, the percentages, and then also that improvement is something to look at, and that has value to look at. But I don't know if there's really a percentile above that we say that's what we truly are striving for. I think it's that continuous progression.
Very good. Okay, just another question about the AEDs. You said there were 50 of them, I think, that have been distributed in city buildings, facilities. What's the number for other places, private property, public buildings like schools or other institutions around the city? Do we know how prevalent they are in other places where they might be utilized? Okay, great and fit, okay. The reason I ask is because if we had sort of a plot map of where they're located and in proximity to where we go for calls, obviously the more we educate the public about where those units are and the ability to use them can have a direct impact, I would think, as well. I mean, obviously a lot of your calls will be in homes, and it's unlikely that a home would have an AED, but if you're in a public place, a shopping center or wherever, doctor's office, maybe it's more likely that they might be there.
And I think
that's right. You know, you can say
Arizona State University, Hans says, has quite a few.
Well, I think that's a measure that we can start to look at, or that's.
To follow up on Andrew's question, is there a list somewhere of all of the Tempe AEDs that we could look at so that way if we're at a meeting offsite, we'd know if there was one around?
Our engineer paramedics goes around to each of them and tests them and checks the batteries and make sure that they're working operationally. So we can put that, actually add that to the SharePoint site as well, to make sure that information's available to everybody.
Any other questions? Got one in the back there. Oh, no problem.
And along with the AEDs, is there some sort of requirement, or obviously money is always an issue, about where gets an AED versus not within the city specifically, as far as facility goes?
I don't believe we had a specific requirement for where we placed them, because I think we were trying to maximize the locations with where the most population was or where we had events. So the TCA, the library, places that have a large population or the community that comes into those areas. So I don't believe there was a, one versus the other. I think it was more designated, how can we actually affect the most population in the community?
Knows what that more importantly per capita people goals, where those ought to go rather than just per population. Would make more sense, more effective than what we're trying to accomplish.
I don't know if there's specific reports or data out there. That's something that we can review and then identify those areas within the city. That's also, as we're looking at Station 7, moving down into that southeast area and that aging population, or that population that is located in that area, that is another reason why we have that station going in that area, so we can more quickly identify that age group, because that's a large age group that's down in that area. So we can look at that information and then try to maximize locations of AEDs to match up with that.
Great presentation, by the way. I don't know if anybody else feels this, but when I look at 10%, 11%, 13%, I find that alarming that many people that have heart attacks actually die on the high end of that. So is there anything being done to try to, proactively prevent that number from being so high, whether it's information or education? It's just scary. I don't know, as I'm getting older too, and I think, that's a high number.
Incorporate into the wellness program. No, I'm just kidding. It might be actually a good thing to incorporate into the wellness program.
Don't look back here, okay? This number is an overall number. So these are people, we're not sure when we found them, we're not sure, everybody's included in this population. So it's not witnessed, somebody went down in front of you and then now we can't bring them back. It's somebody came home and their person, or they woke up and their person's sleeping and they're not waking up. So this number is a very all-encompassing number. When you see bystander CPR, or when you see somebody who was witnessed, you have a much higher success rate or chance for survival as opposed to all the other data that's included. And that's we compare it to that number because the overall number for American Heart Association identifies and uses that parameter, so we're trying to stay consistent with it. The shared data actually does break it down to where they take out some of those outliers where it wasn't a survivable event to begin with. And when it goes to that, our success rate jumps up to about 50%.
I say something? I think there's an important distinction to make here, because you said heart attack. We're not talking about heart attacks.
Yeah.
We're talking about cardiac arrest.
That's what I was going to say.
Cardiac arrest is when your heart stops beating and you're not breathing anymore. A heart attack is if you have low blood flow to your heart muscle. So that's an important distinction. So your chances of surviving an actual heart attack are much, much higher.
Yeah, you can walk around with a heart attack.
Not a question, just a comment. I had that same reaction about the rate being so low, and I think your explanation of what it actually it is, I think most people do equate it with a heart attack rather than cardiac arrest. So having that definition included somewhere where people can actually see that, I think would be helpful, because I think there's a misconception of what that actually is.
And I think for the educational piece, when we talk heart attack versus the cardiac arrest, but when we talk about awareness and trying to improve those numbers, would be to seek help when you are having symptoms, or in laying out what those symptoms are, but getting help sooner than later, because we have a lot of people who end up either being in denial or don't want to go to the hospital or get evaluated. So seeking that help earlier too and getting that educational piece will help.
Just one last comment in terms of an area for growth is the training of city employees on the use of the AED. I know it can be an ongoing thing outside of the department, other departments, and also on compression-only CPR. I imagine our numbers of people who are city employees who are actually certified in compression-only CPR are probably an area where we could see a lot of improvement if we offered those and really publicized it internally. So that, I mean, everybody you have here is a potential bystander to a cardiac arrest, right? And if we're all trained, the numbers would go up.
Yeah, we do train everybody. And the other thing is when we do the compression-only CPR, we educate on the AED, and we have basically a trainer AED that can be utilized. So we train on both of those at the same time.
Cool. Well, it's never easy being first, but you guys did fantastic. Thank you so much. Moving right along, I'll invite the next team up. The team of Julian Drisang, who will introduce himself and begin talking about the second performance measure today, which is to achieve a reduction in the number of fatal and serious injury crashes to 0. Take it away.
Thank you, everybody. Once again, my name is Julian Drisang. I'm the City of Tempe's traffic engineer, and I sit before you today with a vision, and my vision today is 0. Nearly every day on city streets in the city of Tempe, people are involved in automobile crashes. These are incidents that affect people, affects people's lives dramatically in some cases. And so we have a very visionary goal, and that is to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes to 0. As you sit here, I want you to think about the person side of this. Every 10 years, the average person gets in a vehicle crash. And so as I look out at this audience, I believe that each of you in some way has probably been touched by a crash of this nature. Maybe a friend was involved, maybe it's a brother, maybe it's a sister. But think of those people that have either lost a loved one, or maybe that person has been involved and seriously impacted through a serious injury. I can speak to one of my friends. Back in 1998, when I was a senior in high school, 4 students went out driving, like students do, and that evening they were involved in a serious crash. 2 of the students ended up with serious injuries, and my friend Alex did not survive. Alex's mother and father no longer have that son. His brother and sister are missing a brother, and there's many of us out there that are, to this day, missing a friend. So as I go through this presentation, once again, please think of the human side of this and why this goal is so important and why the vision has to be 0. When you look at this, you probably see these as just purple circles on a screen. But with a click, I change those to people. These are brothers, sisters, mothers, children, aunts, uncles, husbands, wives. In the past 5 years in the city of Tempe, 47 people have lost their lives on our streets. In addition to that, 406 people have been seriously injured. As I speak to this, these are not accidents. So often we refer to these as people being involved in accidents. These are not accidents, and these can be prevented. And in the occasions where we can't prevent them, we can at least reduce the severity of them. So as I go through this presentation, and as you'll see on our website, we won't be using the term accidents. We'll be using the term crashes or sometimes collisions. So the data is obviously an important part of this. Where does our data come from? Well, unfortunately, our data comes every day as people are involved in crashes on our city streets. Our City of Tempe Police Department responds to those and sends that crash data information to the Arizona Department of Transportation. At that point, they put all that data together, and then the City of Tempe has access to that data that we use for analysis and trying to prevent these crashes from occurring. Between 2002, or 2012 rather, and 2016, you can see the statistics up there. This is significant. These are people losing their lives. These are people that are getting seriously injured. So what do we do? Well, it's not like we aren't doing anything now. The City of Tempe, our traffic engineering group, works diligently to analyze where crashes are taking place and come up with countermeasures to improve upon that. Our police department works very hard with enforcement to try to make sure that our residents and users of our system are following the rules, driving safely. Our fire and medical rescue respond to crashes as quickly as possible so that some of those serious injuries don't turn into fatal injuries. Our hospitals, similarly, are working to make sure that we're providing the best care as possible when these events happen. So it's not that this isn't taking place, but we think that we can improve upon what we're doing and do better. And so that's the kind of strategies and actions that I'm going to be presenting to you today. The idea of Vision Zero is not unique to the City of Tempe. This was begun in Europe, actually, in Sweden, as a monumental task that they decided that anything above zero just isn't good enough. To say that our goal is 5 fatal crashes a year is saying that 5 people can lose their lives on our streets. So Sweden said that's not good enough and has made a lot of changes and implemented this idea of Vision Zero. And it's starting to take hold and has, you can see from this map in front of you, it's also taking hold in the United States. And a green dot shows cities that have embraced Vision Zero. I would love to see the City of Tempe be the first city in the state of Arizona to have a green dot on this map. So how do we get there? Well, we begin by setting that Vision Zero framework, getting things in place so that we can implement Vision Zero. An important part of that is having an action plan, where we are today and looking to the future. And that's got to include our community, it's got to include city departments, stakeholders, looking to ASU, looking to, as I alluded earlier, hospitals, our residents, getting all that input as stakeholders, because we won't get there alone. We won't do it as silos with the transportation department and the police department, fire and medical rescue. It's working together that we're going to reach this goal. And so also, we have to influence our safety culture. How often do we see at the end of a turn arrow, when it turns red, that cars are still turning? How often do we have it that we're late and we're driving 10 miles per hour over the speed limit on a regular basis? That's a culture. That's a culture that exists here in Tempe. And we have to work towards changing that culture to a safer. And we believe that we can do that through the 5 E's of transportation safety, which includes engineering, the infrastructure that's out there on the street, education, teaching people about the impacts that their decisions might be making. That's education for drivers, bicyclists, pedestrians. Enforcement, which I believe is a handshake deal with education. If we're doing good enforcement, we're really reaching out, having contacts, and educating our residents. Emergency response, touched upon that earlier. The difference between a serious injury crash and a fatal could just be the amount of time it takes to respond. And finally, evaluation, using the data that we have to make good decisions, and then when decisions are made, seeing if that continues to be the right direction, or maybe at some point we need to pivot and go in another direction. So I've had some people say, maybe this is too aggressive, that 5 just isn't reasonable. And they say, how can you change it? How about a scenario where a drunk pedestrian walks across the street and gets hit by a car? Isn't that just a poor decision, and that's something that we have to live with? And I would say maybe in the history we would have that thought process, but with Vision Zero, could we not say, from an engineering standpoint, Maybe this happened at night. Could we have improved lighting so that, yes, you have that drunk pedestrian in the roadway, but the car coming towards them would see them and be able to make a change in their driving behavior? Or perhaps from an education standpoint, teaching that, that being a drunk pedestrian is just as poor of a decision as being a drunk driver, that you're putting yourself at risk. Can we reach out to them? Can we reach out to the drivers? Who are all the people that we can reach out from an education standpoint? Enforcement. Maybe this is a location where we know we're having a lot of mid-block crossings. Maybe it's some additional enforcement educating those users about the safety risks that are there. Back to engineering. Maybe if we know there's a bunch of mid-block pedestrian crashes at this location, that it's a good candidate for pedestrian signalization or something of that nature. Emergency response, getting to that injured pedestrian as quickly as possible, and then using our evaluation tools. So it really is a mind shift from saying, in the past where we might have said, well, this happened and there's nothing we can do, to saying, with all of these, there is something that we can do. So that kind of concludes my presentation for today. Stephanie and her team have been working diligently to help us get some of this data out on the website so that our residents can use this as a tool to understand the safety risks that are out there, and also to just understand what my staff and the police department does when analyzing numbers. So here's the website. This is available now online. This is the showcase for the Vision Zero. This is the introduction screen, and then by clicking on there, you can go to the screen that was previously up there. So here's spatially an idea of where crashes are taking place in the city. By scrolling on the bottom corner, you can use a range of dates. This is 5 years worth of data. You can narrow that down to a month. You could change that to 5 years. And then it's color-coded by a red being a fatality all the way down to just property damage only. As we scroll down on the side, we're going to be showing a lot of different ways to see this data and use that analysis. Scroll down, Stephanie, on the left. Here's another. When we're looking at users, we have bicyclists, we have pedestrians, we have drivers, and too often our bicyclists and our pedestrians are the ones that suffer most. They don't have the luxury of having a metal cage around them, and so we often refer to them as vulnerable users. They're much more vulnerable than your standard vehicle driver, and so we look closely at opportunities to try to improve safety for our bicyclists and our pedestrians. And so this is an opportunity to break down the data and look a little more closely from that standpoint. Scrolling down further, we have a number of just ways to view the data. Why are these happening? What kind of, is there speeding involved? Is there impairment involved? Does it change by month? Does it change by a week? Where is it spatially located? Are we seeing more in the north where maybe we have more bicyclists and pedestrians, or maybe in the south where we see higher speed vehicles? All of these are going to weigh into the decision making and how maybe we can impact the changes and get to our vision of zero. If you scroll down a little bit more, this is an interactive tool where users can actually choose by clicking on the boxes on the top right some of the how that spatially lays out. So where are we having fatal crashes? Where are we having serious injury crashes? Where are we having pedestrian and bicycle crashes? This helps us to share with our public what we're seeing. Are there certain regions, are there hot spots where perhaps we need to look closer and come up with countermeasures? We as traffic engineers do this daily, weekly, monthly, but now this information is available to our public to understand that and see what we're doing. And finally, we have an input form so that people that are using our system can go in and actually notify us of concerns. And not that we don't do this currently through 311 or through phone calls and emails, but this is just a simple tool to help inform us, the city, where they believe that there may be opportunities for improvement. So I think this was just rolled out today, and so I'm really excited along with this, and I'm really excited. I think this is a unique tool. Not a lot of cities have this, and I think that it's going to be a great resource to our residents. So at this point, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any and all questions as it relates to this.
Thank you, Julian. Questions? We've got Rini in the back here. 1 second. It's hard. We're filming, so.
I don't know if I would have asked a question then. So you mentioned when you have intersections where you have a lot of crashes, what are some of the things that you do to mitigate those crashes?
That's an excellent question. And so there's a number of items, we call it generally like a toolbox of different countermeasures that we can do. So one thing you'll notice within the last 5 years, every single traffic signal in the city has countdown pedestrian timers. That was a tool that we're using to help provide pedestrians additional information, and some drivers use it, to know how much time they have to cross the street. So that's an example of an engineering tool that might be out there. Additional lighting, we've noticed up on Scottsdale Road that we seem to be having a higher rate of pedestrian crashes at night, and so we're going to be installing later this, in the near future, in the next couple months, LED lighting, which has been shown to provide better vision for our drivers. So if they, kind of as I mentioned earlier, if we can avoid the crashes, that helps too. So there's a number of different tools. There's a lot of resources out there. There's a warehouse that they call it online, and it actually has countermeasures and the expected percentage of decrease in crashes, sometimes by fatal, serious, sometimes it's by all, on rural roads, urban roads. So there's a lot of research taking place. A lot of engineers are doing great things, and that information is being shared. And so we can use that information depending on the type of crashes and the time of day and all that to decide what is the best countermeasure to use. And so that's a great question. Thank you, Rini.
Thanks. Hi. My question really revolves around behavior. You did a great job describing places. And so is there a next evolution related to behavior that impacts traffic safety?
Are you alluding to the education and enforcement component?
I mean, we recognize there are three components: engineering, education, and enforcement. So is there an evolution where you'll describe some of the enforcement or the education components?
I'm not sure I completely when you're speaking to an evolution, could you clarify?
In the future, will you speak to the behaviors that are related to traffic collisions?
That's an excellent point. Over some studies say 99% of crashes are a result of human error. And so if we don't address the human component and the human decision making, then we're going to miss the majority of the improvements that can be made. And so some things that go along with that, driver distraction. We need to really cut down on driver distraction. Cell phones are too easy these days to look. It's really hard to quantify from a crash standpoint when responding with police officers whether that person was in fact holding a device or not, but just educating drivers about that. Another side of it, I think, is autonomous vehicles are going to be a game changer, and it might not be today, it might not be 5 years from now as the fleet turns over, but there's a lot of promise that removing that driver component, which is where we see not even the majority, as high as 99% of the errors, if we can reduce that, we think there's opportunity there. So I hope that kind of alludes to what you're going
It does.
with.
I wonder what constraints exist to addressing that 99% of the primary collision factor issue that you just described.
Ideally, it'd be education, and it's very hard to reach out to that. We find that most of our drivers, when they're 16, or some of our millennials when they're 20, get their driver's license, they pass their test, and that's the last formal driving education that they get for the rest of their lives. So I think that maybe that's something that we can look at more on a legislative side, or working with our high schools or something to that effect. But education is the key to this, but it's also one of the hardest of the E's, I think, to meet.
Hi, Julian. Nice job. One question I had, but first I'm going to make a statement. I just want to thank Julian and Lieutenant Wilson's not here, and some of our traffic folks, Steve's back here, but we already have an interdepartmental team that we've been working, 5, 6, 7 years to study the top locations in Tempe regarding fatals and serious injuries, so that's been a great team. But my question is, with the amount of drivers from other cities in the valley, especially Tempe, our daytime population, is there a Maricopa County initiative or state initiative, especially, I guess, for Tempe, because we have so many people that aren't from Tempe that probably won't be visiting our site because they don't live here or work here. But is the county or the state, I would hope, focusing money and the same kind of ideas we have here in Tempe to help us, because so many of our drivers don't live here. And so.
Point. Yeah, I think the numbers is something like we have about 170,000 sleeping population, and we have like a 280,000 daytime population. So the city of Tempe, do have that influx of vehicles, and as well as our residents working outside the city in some situations. So I think that's a very excellent point. There is a Arizona State Strategic Highway Safety Plan that exists, and that I've been able to be a member of the pedestrian, bicycle, and motorcycle components, and a lot of the E's that I showed here carry over to that. So there is a state level. There's also a county level through a MAG plan, but not as aggressive as what we're looking at here. Through GOHS, I know that our police department is able to get funding in some cases for additional enforcement and such, but I think that's an excellent point, and my hope would be that maybe City of Tempe, as we move through this process, can be a leader within that, and that other communities can learn from what we do, and it can maybe branch out and really encompass with eventually the state of Arizona being a Vision Zero state. That would be, I think that would be fantastic. But for now, I think we're going to do the best we can locally, and then if we can expand that, at some point that needs to happen. But thank you for pointing that out. That's very important.
Other questions, anyone? In terms of next steps, Julian, in terms of getting the city to officially become a Vision Zero city, what does that take?
So we'll be doing a presentation to the City Council in January 10th, January 11th, where we'll be presenting information about this particular performance measure. And ideally, we hope to see our mayor and council aggressively adopt this. It's already part of the performance measure, but really just make it known that this is something that we're 100% in and that we're going to take on. And then the next step from there would then be bringing together all those stakeholders to get an action plan in place, which could take as much as 9 months to a year. We haven't been through this process, but we want to make sure that we take the time and make that plan right so that we have a game plan moving forward on how to reach that goal. So I see that this is taking as much as a year to get to that point where we're really aggressively moving forward. But that's not to say that between now and then we're not going to continue to do the great things that we're already doing.
Okay, go ahead, Ken.
Can you just clarify, you're a real traffic engineer, right? Because Don Messler told me everybody thinks you're a traffic engineer. Right. So as a real traffic engineer, like Andrew said with the last goal, that there are conflicting goals. And as a traffic engineer, you also have goals to move people effectively through the city. So you could reach this goal by just reducing the speed limit to 10 miles an hour on every street in Tempe, but you have to weigh it against the other goals. Is that going to be a problem? I mean, are you going to have safety features that you could introduce that hamper some of our other goals of moving people effectively?
I think that's a very excellent point. And as you point out, we have another performance goal, which is to reduce congestion on our streets by travel times by 5%. So how do we reduce congestion? Moving people through the system faster, sometimes, or maybe faster. A lot of times that's counter against some of the safety benefits. So I think it's difficult. We're going to have to work through those, but there are examples of cases where we can make those work together. So we have in the past, when we did speed humps, it was a continuous mound that went across the roadway. Now what we do is we have speed cushions, so there's actually separate lumps in the roadway that are wide enough so that a fire truck can actually, the wheelbase fits through the speed hump so that the fire trucks can respond at the same rate they did before, but we can still slow down drivers. So I think that's an opportunity where we can still respond quickly, but still slow down drivers. So I think they don't always have to compete. I think there's room in a lot of cases where they can work together, but at the same time, I think it would be impossible to have over 100 strategic measures and not have some of them in some ways not work together exactly as maybe we'd want. But thank you for that.
One more comment from the chief, and then I think we're going to wrap up.
So, what are the barriers to us collaborating side by side? Because my question really revolves around you're an engineer, we deal with the enforcement. It's definitely a collaborative effort to ensure greater safety on the roadways in Tempe. So, what are the barriers in this effort for police and your team to collaborate to address this measure?
So we're already doing some great things. Myself and Randy Wilson meet monthly at a coffee shop and discuss things that are going on between traffic engineering and the police department's traffic bureau, and we're also improving the economy by buying coffee there. That's an engineering joke. But I think through the strategic plan is where we're really going to identify what are the synergies, how can we work together to improve upon what we're already doing. And so another example is this data. In the past, the City of Tempe Traffic Engineering has been the holder of this data, and then I think the police department has had their own data sets, and we kind of have been working on off our own separate computers. Through this, I see that opportunity for more data sharing, more understanding, and that's the main key is from this action plan. So I don't want to put the buggy ahead of the horse and know exactly how that's going to play out. I'm hoping that through the development of that action plan, having each of the stakeholders in the room explaining what information they have and what their skill sets are and what they can bring to the table, that as a result, at the end of that is where I'll have a better answer for that question. But there's definitely opportunities. We're doing a good job now, but through this action plan and through it working together, it'll just get that much better.
All right. Thank you very much, Julian. That was great. Really appreciate it. All right, well, that concludes our first inaugural Tempe Accelerate session. We have another one. We're going to keep it here in the chambers Thursday, October 26, 2 p.m. So we're going to have it in the chambers. We're going to have it at 2 p.m. on Thursdays, but not every Thursday. So we'll continue to send out calendar updates, but the next one will be a week from today, right here, 2 o'clock. Thank you again for being here. And for those of you who can stay, at 3 o'clock, we're going to have a special press conference regarding the city's Municipal Equality Index score for 2017, which is also good news. So thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming.